picture this. Imagine all your meals are ready for a busy week ahead. No last-minute grocery store runs, no overspending on takeout or restaurant meals, no daily cooking or tiresome cleanup after you finish cooking, no exhaustion from trying to decide what to eat every single day multiple times a day, no boring meal prep. Well, welcome to my world. This is my meal prep perspective. Every week I make healthy meal prep for myself and my husband, and for breakfast this week I made protein, pear, and cardamom sheetpan pancakes along with baked eggs and chicken sausages. For lunch, I grilled rosemary chicken and peppers and served with a kale salad, and for dinner, grilled pork tenderloin along with roasted butternut squash and green beans. I'll always be an advocate for meal prep meals that aren't boring, and this process should make your life easier. If you aren't sure where to begin or how to begin, you're in the right place. Meal prep is more than a routine for me. I know it's part of my mission. I believe in sharing my authentic journey, offering insights into my process, and learning alongside my incredible community. And I'm here to help. I've been meal prepping for over a decade. I have my master's degree in public health nutrition. I've been a personal trainer in top NYC gyms for 6+ years, and now I'm opening my own gym and cafe in Brooklyn, New York. I love my YouTube community, and I'm here to help sort through all the nutritional noise, and together we'll create a healthy, vibrant life. Join me and we'll begin my meal prep process this week. I'm starting it off by roasting a ton of butternut squash that I cut up off camera. It was on sale at my local fruit and veggie stand, so I bought a lot. Shout out to Mr. Kiwi if you're in Brooklyn, definitely check it out. I'll add some olive oil along with a simple sprinkle of salt and pepper for seasonings. Butternut squash is one of those vegetables that can really transform into so many things, but simply roasting it is one of my favorite ways to serve it. I used up the last of my olive oil, so it's pooling in the middle of the pan, and I'll do my due diligence to toss these all together so each piece of squash has olive oil. This is what will make it caramelized in the oven, which is what makes it so delicious. These will go into the oven to roast, and I've got my oven set to 400 degrees. I wanted to do this first because I know this might take some time to cook in the oven. Next up, I'll start part of my breakfast meal, which I have a very large package of chicken sausage that I need to separate because I'm only going to use one of them today. I'll put the other packages in the freezer and thaw them when I'm ready to use them. I am such a huge fan of really making the use of a freezer to extend the life of food. It's a really fantastic way to meal prep in bulk or even buy in bulk. I feel so fortunate here to have the space to store things in the freezer, and if we had the space, I would love to have a giant deep freezer. And I especially feel so thankful because here in New York, in the US, we have reliable energy. So I know that my fridge will be on and working, and the power doesn't just go out randomly. If it does, it's a big problem, and there's a whole crew responding, and so many parts of the world don't have that. So yes, absolutely, buying in bulk, cooking in bulk, such a privilege. Fully recognize the privilege. And if you have the privilege of having a fridge that's on and a freezer that's on and reliable, then make use of it, you know? I cut the sausages in half and threw them into the oven, and now I'm on to the next part of breakfast, my egg mixture. I'll start by cracking my eggs into my large mixing bowl, and I'm gonna do a ton of eggs today because I've really been trying to incorporate more protein into my breakfast, and eggs are one of the most perfect foods from a nutrition perspective. I'll add in a bit of cottage cheese. The one I've got here is my all-time favorite one. It's the low-fat version from Trader Joe's, and no, I don't think you need to have the low-fat one because you need low fat, but in my opinion, I like the flavor of this one so much more than the full-fat one they sell. And adding in cottage cheese also ups my protein, which we love. I had some Laughing Cow cheeses that I'll add into this mix as well. With both the cottage cheese and the Laughing Cow cheese, this egg mixture is going to be so creamy and absolutely delish. I'll also add in some pepper and a little bit of salt, and then it's time for the fun part. I'm going to use my immersion blender, and if you don't have one yet, consider this a sign to get one and make your life a little bit easier. I love being able to mix right in the container that I'm using instead of using my countertop blender and dirtying the giant blender cup that always feels so annoying to wash. And honestly, this year, I've been really fortunate to make some small purchases that have made a big impact on this meal prep process for me. A veggie chopper, an immersion blender. Grateful is an understatement. I'll remove my sheet pan with my sausages from the oven and flip them all over, and now I'm ready to pour over my egg mixture. I decided to not be completely OCD about the way the sausages were arranged after they moved when the eggs were poured in, which was a huge accomplishment for me. And then I'll very slowly put this sheet pan into the oven. I am always so relieved when I don't spill anything on the way into the oven. I'm cutting up some prickly pears next, and these were on sale as well, and I don't think I've ever had these as the actual fruit itself, so I've tried the flavor and other things before, but this was definitely my first time cutting them up myself and trying them. There were some seeds with the fruit, and I wasn't planning to use this for meal prep, so really I was just cutting up a little snack for my husband and I, and we ate them as we meal prepped. I really love trying new things, especially something like this, fruits, veggies. That's why it's so fun to go to the grocery store sometimes and just see what's on sale and try things and experiment. And honestly, I think that's how I learned so much about cooking too. Maybe I've mentioned it before, but I think I really honed a lot of my cooking skills when I was on a really tight budget. I would go to the fruit and vegetable stand that was only a few blocks from my second apartment in New York City. And I mentioned it earlier, Mr. Kiwi. So I would go and just buy whatever was on sale, and when I got home, it always felt like an episode of Chopped because I was just making things up as I went. I definitely made some interesting meals in those years, but I learned so much, and that's really the time when I stopped following recipes. I stopped being afraid to experiment and started cooking without measuring. Started cooking with new flavors or veggies I'd never cooked with before. I didn't grow up eating or cooking very diverse meals, so this was an incredible time of growth for me. I've come a long way from those meals in that process, but at the time, it worked really well for me, and I learned so much. And that's part of the reason I'm such an advocate for learning to cook and learning to cook without recipes. It really puts you in control of how you eat and what you eat, and you'll hone your chef skills that way. And that's a big part of the reason I share my process. I really love teaching. I always have, and I love how empowering it feels to be able to cook nutritious and delicious meals. If we're lucky, we'll eat multiple times a day, every day for the rest of our lives. And there's really no time like the present to learn some new skills. I swear I learn something new every single day. What's something you've learned recently? Maybe it's related to cooking or meal prepping, or maybe it's just something you want to share. Comment below and hopefully we'll all learn something together. All right, and back to what I'm doing. I got my pears and I'm cutting those up because those are for breakfast, and I want to cut them into really small pieces because I'm going to use them for my sheet pan pancakes. My sheet pan eggs also came out of the oven, and my husband brought in the peppers off the grill. To my pear mixture, I'm going to add a few things to give them just a little bit more flavor. I added some honey, a little splash of lemon juice to keep them from browning, and a generous sprinkle of cardamom. Cardamom's definitely a newer flavor in my life. I feel like I've been cooking with it for a few years now, maybe 7 or 8 years, but it's definitely still new, and I love finding new ways to add it into things. And with the pears, it's absolutely divine. Definitely try it if you haven't. I'll stir this mixture together and set it aside because I'm not ready to use it quite yet. My sheet pan eggs have cooled for a few minutes, and I need the sheet pan that they're on, so I'm going to transfer them onto my counter, and I put a kitchen towel down first, so I'm going to lift them up and onto the kitchen towel. That's why parchment paper is the greatest of all time, the GOAT forever. Because not only does it make cleanup easier, it makes moments like this absolutely possible. I've got fresh parchment down on my sheet pan, and I'm ready to add it into the oven with some green beans. These are frozen green beans. I'm obsessed with frozen fruit, frozen vegetables. You probably already knew that, but I'm gonna add this onto my sheet pan. I'll keep it super simple for these guys. I'm gonna add some olive oil, some salt and pepper, and into the oven they'll go. My eggs were cool enough to cut and portion out into our meal prep containers, and I always try to do my best to cut them evenly, but I usually skew it a little bit and end up giving my husband the larger pieces since he's always a little bit more hungry than I am. Sometimes I'll bake the eggs directly into my meal prep containers, but this day I just wanted to get this done really fast, and the meal prep containers can take a while to cool. So I use the sheet pan method. This recipe is definitely on my blog, a version of it, many versions of it. Let me know if you have any questions at all. This is an incredible breakfast meal prep idea. I'll get the peppers portioned into my meal prep containers next, and then I'll be on to the next task. Now I'll get started on a really easy marinade for my chicken. I'm gonna start by cutting up some fresh rosemary and adding it into my marinade pan. I'll follow that with some balsamic vinegar and olive oil, and that simple marinade is done. I bought my chicken in bulk from Costco, so I separated half, and you'll see what I do with the other half in a little bit. I'll get my chicken breasts into my container and make sure each one is covered in the marinade, and then I'll pass them off to my husband to grill. And because this marinade has vinegar in it, that balsamic vinegar, it won't need to sit in this marinade for very long, and actually shouldn't. The vinegar will actually start to cook the chicken, and we don't really want to let the vinegar do that. We're gonna let the grill do that, but chemistry's cool, right? Alright, so the rest of this mega pack of chicken, the other half of this, I'm gonna have my husband grill this week as well. And instead of using it for meal preps for this week, this is gonna end up going into our freezer once it's cooked. We're traveling and won't have time to meal prep when we get back. So I wanted to get ahead of this weekend so that we can set ourselves up for success when we get back from a trip and or exhausted. I don't have anything planned for this chicken specifically, so I just use some olive oil and a simple green goddess seasoning, and the grill will add the rest of the flavor. This way it's super versatile for when we come back, and I can kind of throw it into whatever I want. And of course, because I had raw meat on my counters, I sanitized with a Lysol wipe to prevent any cross-contamination. My husband brought the grilled pork tenderloins in from the grill, and I'll set them to the side to rest and cool. My butternut squash is out of the oven, and I want to free up both my large sheet pans, so I'll transfer them both onto the countertop to cool. This is where the parchment paper comes in handy again. I had to sample a piece, and it was so delicious. Roasting it really brings out the flavor and lets it shine. Now I'm getting started on the second part of breakfast for this week and breakfast for when we get back from vacation. So I'm going to use 2 pre-made mixes of Kodiak pancake mix. This very large box came from Costco and is super high in protein, so really makes a great breakfast. I love making the pancakes on a sheet pan instead of doing them all one by one because it goes so much faster like this. I wanted to follow the package directions, but nowhere on the package did it give instructions for using the entire bag of mix at once, so I had to measure the mix out to start. That's the one thing I will measure. When it comes to baking or things like this, I'll usually measure. I added eggs and milk to add more protein, but I didn't want to use all of my milk up, so I mixed these together and I used mostly water with a little bit of milk. After I whisked this together, I added in cardamom into the batter, and this is what I'm going to use for my meal prep for this week, and you'll see the way I make the other version for post-vacay meal prep in a little bit. I slowly poured the mix onto my sheet pan. I'd also added some parchment paper, which fits my sheet pans absolutely perfectly, so that way I didn't have to worry about this getting stuck, but I still had to be really cautious, so I didn't pour it and move the paper too much. So if you're doing this with parchment paper, use caution. After my mix was settled, I added my cut cardamom, honey pears, and I tried to sprinkle them evenly, and I really had way too many. I thought I was going to add all of these, but I didn't end up needing them. So the extra pears were a great snack for both of us since we don't really eat very much while we're meal prepping. I very cautiously carried this to the oven. Let me tell you, my heart was beating. I was absolutely certain I was going to spill this, so I moved like a snail. But it made it into the oven and I could breathe again. Then I started on the other mix that once cooked is going into the freezer for that post-baking meal prep. I followed the same process as the previous batch, and this time I added cinnamon to the batter and sprinkled blueberries on top. And while I was mixing this one up, I was thinking about what a great way this is to meal prep. If I had the freezer space, I would probably meal prep like once a month and just do an entire marathon day of cooking. But again, it's really important to keep your cooked food safe from spoiling and growing bacteria because food safety is no joke, and unless you have the freezer space, cooking once a month probably isn't in the cards for us. I took my green beans out of the oven and now I'll portion out my butternut squash and green beans into my containers. And speaking of food safety, I recently took the New York City Food Protection course and it was so good to refresh my food safety knowledge. I took the exam, it's an in-person exam, and I passed with a 96 out of 100. I wanted a perfect score, so that was annoying, but now I can officially be the supervisor of my cafe that's in my business, so yay for that. It also reminded me that I need to probably share more about food safety on here, so if you guys have questions or you want to know more, please ask away. Once everything's portioned into my containers, I'll cut up my pork tenderloins, and my husband also finished grilling our rosemary balsamic chicken, so that's ready to be sliced up and portioned out too. This is the pre-seasoned pork tenderloin from Trader Joe's, and it is absolutely so delicious. Especially, I always like the crispy pieces on the end, so that's my favorite. And we're almost to the end of meal prep. Stay here with me, watch till the end so you can see how I finish these meals off. And now my sheetpan pancakes are done, so they're coming out of the oven and getting cut up and portioned into our containers. The final thing I wanted to do was add a drizzle of balsamic glaze onto the grilled rosemary chicken, and voila. And just like that, another week of nutritious and delicious meals. Meal prep's ready for a week, and so am I. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, leave a comment, ask a question. Your presence means the world to me. Can't wait to see you next time. Bye!